Welcome to a quick discussion of Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. With the hype surrounding the Mario movie, I wanted to revisit this fairly notorious entry. By now, I think it's common knowledge that Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels was Super Mario Bros. 2 in Japan. It was released in 1986 and was deemed too difficult for Western audiences at the time. To be honest, as someone who still struggles a lot with this game, I can't say I disagree with that assessment, but it was especially true at the time. In the West, there was a major video game crash in the early 80s that Mario 1 helped to alleviate. To be honest, releasing a very difficult sequel right as the industry was starting to recover probably would have been a mistake, so instead Nintendo released Yume Kojo Doki Doki Panic as Mario 2 in the West. Comparing both games called Mario 2 is actually really interesting. Obviously, Mario 2 USA is a drastic departure from the original given that it wasn't even meant to be a Mario game originally, while The Lost Levels is very much a direct continuation of the original, with a harder difficulty and slightly reworked graphics. So for example, the ground details are a little bit different, and a lot of the other environmental details have been updated as well, but a lot of the character and enemy sprites are actually unchanged. The level design very much feels like a tougher version of what you'd see in Mario 1, for better or worse. In some cases, it's actually pretty interesting. In other cases, it's actually really annoying, which is why I'm not the biggest fan of the Lost Levels. I'm not even the biggest fan of Mario 2, to be honest, but I do actually prefer that to the Lost Levels because of this game's ridiculous difficulty at times. Interestingly, World 1 follows a very similar pattern to World 1 in Mario 1. So for example, we went from an above-ground stage to an underground stage to a sky-based stage. But again, the difficulty ramps up very fast. For example, we now have flying bloopers to worry about. I don't know how, but they fly now. So we have to time this a little bit more carefully. Again, the same rule applies as always, where if you're crouching, they won't be able to reach you, thankfully. It's actually really getting in the way. I really wish I could reach it with a fireball, but I guess not. There we go, finally. So we also have these, like, weighted platforms that I'm pretty sure are introduced much later on in the original, and we're already running into them in World 1 in the Lost Levels. So yeah, in a way, it's actually very creative, taking some of the harder concepts from the original and introducing and iterating on these concepts, but it also leads to a lot of frustration later on. And we have our first castle, which as expected, does not pull any punches right off the bat. We have plenty of fire bars to worry about that we carefully want to dodge. We have a split path here. I think I want to take the top path because it makes this jump easier. I feel like I would bonk on the upper path if I took the lower path, which would not be great. I want to keep fire as long as possible because in the Lost Levels, you need all of the help you can get, to be honest. I barely got through that in time. This part here feels very Mario Maker to me, with these little, like, barricades that kind of force you to jump over, just to create opportunities to run into the fireballs from Bowser. So yeah, in a way this does feel very Mario Maker, in good ways and bad, in terms of feeling a little bit haphazard in trying to up the ante of the original's level design. Another interesting thing in the Lost Levels is it introduces a lot of firsts. For example, Luigi, for the first time in the series, has different physics from Mario. He has a standard slippery physics for running and stopping, and he also has a slightly higher jump, which actually means that Luigi, if I'm not mistaken, is actually the speedrun character because of his better jumping. Though, to be honest, for a casual playthrough, I actually find it really difficult to get through a game that's this difficult with the looser physics that Luigi has. Also, there's actually some interesting gimmicks involving weather. For example, there's actually strong winds in certain stages that can either work for or against you, depending on if it's pushing you back or forward. There's also poison mushrooms for the first time, which look a lot like the standard mushrooms, but are slightly darker colored and obviously count as an enemy. We saw one just a little bit ago. So yeah, in general, The Lost Levels is very interesting as a very iterative sequel compared to the very different Mario 2 USA. I may be misremembering because this was a very, very long time ago, but I think this is actually as far as I ever got in this game. My first playthrough of the game was actually through the Super Mario Bros. Deluxe release for the Game Boy Color. So when you beat the game, when you beat Mario 1 in Deluxe, you unlock a mode called Super Mario Bros. For Super Players, which is actually just the Lost Levels with some changes. So for example, I'm pretty sure Mario and Luigi actually have the same physics in the Game Boy Color version, while in this version they do have different physics, and I'm also pretty sure that the weather, like the wind, was actually removed also. Which makes sense because the Game Boy Color wouldn't exactly be a very powerful handheld. So yeah, I remember getting at least to World 2. Like, I distinctly remember one section in World 2 coming up shortly. Actually, it's right here. This part's really annoying, actually. And I definitely can see why I might have gotten stuck here as a kid. Basically, you have to reveal hidden blocks to actually make it to this warp pipe to jump across. It's really difficult, or really fiendish this early on to already be employing, like, hidden blocks to get through certain areas. But again, this game does not pull any punches, for better or worse. That jump feels very strict as well, but overall we got through that without too much difficulty at least. And in terms of World 2 gimmicks, we're actually back on track with a Cheep Cheep Bridge. We actually skipped the underwater stage though, which is a little bit peculiar given that that was a thing in Mario 1, and again, a lot of the stages had been following the archetypes of Mario 1 up until that point. But obviously, again, this is definitely a lot more stressful, with some bloopers flying around and some very strict jumps for this early in the game. The very first actual international release of The Lost Levels was actually through Super Mario All-Stars. But yeah, the first one I would play would be the Game Boy Color collection. If you're a Nintendo Switch Online member, you actually have access to both versions of Mario The Lost Levels. I almost said Mario 2, which would be a little bit too vague, actually, but you also have access to both versions of Mario 2 there as well, I suppose. But basically, I would actually recommend the NES version over All-Stars for once, partly because I feel like, unless I'm misremembering, Mario The Lost Levels for All-Stars actually I had considerably less momentum than I thought I had, but as I was saying, I'm pretty sure the All-Stars version of The Lost Levels actually homogenizes the art styles between Mario 1 and The Lost Levels. So you don't get like different ground sprites, for example, between the two games, which I actually do feel like that helps this game stand out a little bit by having unique elements compared to the first game visually. I'm going to try to run through here, that's actually very risky, but we got through it, so I'm not complaining. I'm almost surprised it took this long for me to mess up a jump. I kind of expected to die a little bit earlier, to be honest, with how difficult this game can be at times. But we got to World 2, and now things start to get really interesting as we move on to World 3. we have a snow aesthetic, which definitely does not bode well because the snow aesthetic in the first game led to Hammer Bros. So these were in World 5 originally, and we're already seeing them in World 3. So yeah, this game does not hold back, and again, I definitely think if this game had released in the West, people who are excited about Mario 1 might have played this game and then decided to like never play a Mario game again because of how frustrating this could be. So yeah, I definitely think Mario 2 USA was the right call. I always have felt a little bit mixed about Mario 2, but I've actually warmed up to it in more recent years, and actually knowing the backstory of it has actually helped quite a bit, to be honest. You know, knowing why Mario 2 doesn't feel like a Mario game actually helps a lot. And to be honest, Mario 2 has actually had quite a bit of influence on the franchise going forward. So for example, that was the introduction of a lot of beloved characters nowadays. You know, you have Birdo, you have Bob-ombs, you have a ton of elements in Mario 2 USA that would become staples for the rest of the series. So yeah, in some ways, I feel like I have a lot more respect for Mario 2 nowadays than I did at the time, where I just thought it was some like really bizarre spin-off-y kind of feeling game and not like an actual sequel. And then the actual sequel is just kind of insufferable at times, so yeah, in general, I would take USA over Mario 2, the Lost Levels. Here's a very interesting trick. You can actually use this little, like, trampoline to access a secret warp zone. You can basically go over the goal here, and you can run all the way over to a warp zone. However, the Lost Levels is very mean. So when you get over here, it's a warp zone backwards to World 1. So you obviously have an option of going back to World 1, or jumping into the pit and continuing from a checkpoint. So yeah, this game does have some very rude level design, and again, it definitely helps it stand out for better or worse. I'm not even worried about the mushroom, I'll probably die in the process of getting it, so I'm just gonna move on, to be honest. Sometimes you have to pick your battles carefully in a game like this. This is a real predicament here. I'm not entirely sure how to proceed through this. That barely worked out. So yeah, and this is the early part of the game, which is why I never want to do a full playthrough of this game for my channel, and am content with doing a one-off, because again, if you think this is rude, this is still the easy part of the game. Now there are some interesting gimmicks in terms of that. I should also add that I'm pretty sure in the Lost Levels there's actually bonus worlds, so you have your main 8, but then you have lettered worlds, so you have World A, B, C, D, to go through as well. I think there might be a World 9 too, actually, before you even get to the lettered worlds. I actually have never gone through those. To be honest, in the original, it's such a pain to actually unlock those. You have to like play the game multiple times or something. I think they make it easier in Lost Levels, but these were also not in the Game Boy Color version, though to be fair, there was no way I was ever getting that far in the Game Boy Color version. I was not that good at Mario when I was that young. But yeah, this is an incredibly rude enemy pattern. We somehow got through that, and we can keep swimming over here. I also never liked how, in Mario 1, the pits in water kind of drag you downwards. It's always really annoying, and again, in a game like this that's this difficult, it's definitely not appreciated having to fight momentum there. I can't believe this is going as well as it is, and I don't want to say that too soon, because things can still definitely go awry here. I think I'll just wait here for a bit. So yeah, you can see how bad the level design gets very quickly. And again, in some ways it does feel very Mario Maker, maybe a little bit less chaotic in some ways. But yeah, just kind of like throwing everything in the kitchen sink at you, like putting in a dead end there is really rude, especially... I was going to say putting in a dead end is really rude, especially when in the original Mario games, you can't back up. So like the screen locks when you get to a certain point. So yeah, if you go to a dead end, you are stuck and you basically have to either get hit by a blooper or wait out the timer. So yeah, I do find this game very fascinating in terms of like level design, and in my opinion, in some cases, how not to make a fun Mario level, but to make a very challenging Mario level. But I definitely can't recommend the game wholeheartedly. I mean, it's on like Switch Online for both All-Stars and the NES version. So in some ways, I feel like it's almost worth trying just to see how bad this game gets. And again, seeing like the unique backgrounds is actually kind of nice for the NES version specifically. I keep saying NES when it's actually technically Famicom and not NES. But in general, I can't say I fully recommend finishing this game, and especially trying to get to the bonus worlds in the NES version, just because of how much of an ordeal it is to actually get over there. I think I'll give 3-2 another try, and we'll probably call it after that. At least we have a Fire Flower this time. That should help immensely. This is definitely one of those games where you want to keep fire as long as possible, because again, if the game is going to throw a lot at you, you want to be as ready as possible for that. And it's just barely out of range. I'm definitely playing with fire in more ways than one here. Definitely. Okay, it went off screen, so we should be good to go. Yeah, it is very interesting. I feel like this is relatively unchanged in terms of like the sprites. So it's mostly just like the ground and like above ground or underground that's actually really different. I also feel like some of the later stages also get really rough. To be honest, I haven't finished this game in an extraordinarily long time. I think it was on 3DS Virtual Console. It might have been one of the Ambassador games, but I actually don't remember. But to be honest, I used a ton of restore points, and if you're playing on Switch through the online service, I would actually highly recommend using rewinds or suspend points just to make your life a little bit less miserable trying to get through this. I definitely feel like trying to get through this, especially on the first playthrough, as is, would be incredibly annoying, so I definitely, yeah, would highly recommend using copious amounts of suspend points and, rewinds, and I guess I died right at the end of the level, unfortunately. But yeah, that was a quick look at Super Mario Bros. Lost Levels, so thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time for another discussion.